You know, with the Switch 2, I no longer need a 1080p capture card. I actually need a second one that runs at 4K, which means I gotta make a major upgrade to my recording setup. So I'm hoping that AverMedia's Live Gamer 4K might do the trick. Hello and welcome. My name is Wolfie. You're watching GreaterThanPie, and today we're gonna be taking a look at this, the AverMedia Live Gamer 4K. Now, I already have a 4K capture card inside of my editing PC, but it's a bit old. It's an Elgato one. It's the 4K 60. Either way, it is limited. It cannot do HDR, and unfortunately, it is not very flexible when it comes to settings. So I've been running into a couple issues with it, and with the Switch 2 kind of being that push for me to get something new in my system, I decided, why not actually try AverMedia again? I actually really liked their capture cards when I first used them, and honestly, they were cheaper. Like, I actually have two here. Full transparency, one of these is a separate video, but these both were about 200. Actually, I think it was less. It was more like 180, I think. And the point is, if you're trying to get 4K capture cards that below 200, yeah, I couldn't get them with Elgato. But so today we're gonna be looking at this one, the Live Gamer 4K. This is the PCIe capture card. I have tested in the past, and I have found that PCIe is the most reliable way to get a good capture. And this one can go up to 240 frames per second. I believe that is pass-through with VRR, which is even crazier. So this thing's loaded with features. In fact, let's go over those. So this capture card can actually capture 4K 60, pass through both HDR and 240 frames per second. And it can capture in HD up to 240 frames per second. At 1440p, I think it's 120. So it's actually still really useful at 1440p. And you can capture 1440p at 120 FPS. It's capable of passing through surround sound, which is not a given. And of course, it has its own software. At least that's everything written on the bottom of the back of the box. And guess what? It has RGB. So let's not dart around too much and let's actually get into here and see what's inside. The box itself is literally like a hollow print. Like, if you ever opened up a shipping box of trading cards, this is what it's like. That's interesting. All right, okay, we got a box in a box. And in that box is a piece of cardboard and foam, and then the card. Wow. We also got that AverMedia ad. That tells you everything AverMedia makes. All right. Well, it's got some heft, actually. So we'll take a look at that in a second. We've got a virtual serial key to something. We've got quick start guide. This one's very simple, like dead simple. And then we have our not HDMI 2.1 cable, because this does not actually have HDMI 2.1. There is a new version of this card that exists that does, but it'd be a little bit overkill for a Switch 2, and I honestly, you know, don't like wasting money. So why would I? So this cable is about 5 feet, pretty thin, and underneath there's nothing. Okay, so then let's take a look at the actual card itself. So you'll notice that this is not a PCIe by 1. This is a PCIe by 3, I think it is. And that is because it needs that for the extra little bits of bandwidth and some of those higher refresh rates. Our inputs, though, those are only an HDMI in and HDMI out. There's nothing else to it. And then there's the RGB element right here at the top. This shroud is metal, and there's actually a metal heatsink on the inside there. So this thing's actually kind of beefy. I actually see, like, those look like RAM packages. This thing's got memory built into it and a processor. So it's like a mini GPU almost. That's what it actually looks like on the inside. That's actually kind of cool. So this thing should be an upgrade over the 4K 60. We're gonna have to test it and find out, which means I'm gonna have to, well, install it. So let's take a look at their software, because this is actually pretty cool. So they have two pieces of pack-in software. There's the AverMedia Streaming Center and the Assist Central Pro. Here's the cool thing, right? I have this open and I have OBS open, and I can actually see that this is feeding into OBS correctly by popping it up as its main input.
So as you can see, this is actually still in OBS, despite also being here, which is something that the Elgato software has kind of struggled with. It was one of those things that I actually consistently had issues, is having it show up in both places. So that actually is already an improvement. The other thing is you can see the specs of everything coming out and, well, being put directly into the capture card, which is extremely useful for troubleshooting problems. So are you getting your 4K? Are you getting your 60? You know, what's the color codecs looking like? Things that are a little bit more advanced, but actually really nice to be able to see at a glance. And there are other little like extra things like HDCP protection, which fortunately this is connected currently to my gaming PC, does not have that as a thing enabled. And I've run this through the Nintendo Switch as well, and it's not a problem there either. You have your basic RGB control, changing its color, changing its like effect, and then this can also be taken over by Windows for its unified RGB thing, which is, it's a bit iffy. And I found that using the actual, you know, built-in controller is a little bit easier. And then where it gets into the nitty-gritty is the settings, because there are so many little plugins that go into OBS. Like this is a plugin for OBS right here. There's the streaming center, which is open right here. And then you can do everything from flashing firmware, checking HDMI compatibility. There's actually like an in detail setting that if you have everything closed out, you can kind of like set it so that the HDMI reports to the monitor as a completely different thing than it actually is. And this is useful for specifically like troubleshooting certain areas, like the handshake between the thing you're trying to record, the monitor, and the capture card can get a little bit iffy. And so being able to come in here and actually troubleshoot that is very, very useful. Granted, I did run into issues with it where I was having it overwritten by the monitor itself, and that did lead to a rather interesting situation. Now, pass-through is where things get interesting. We can actually enable HDR, and as you saw from the diagnostic section, I am actually running at a full 4K 60 on here. Now, if I lowered this to 1440, I could get the 120 that this monitor can produce. Actually, this does 160, but digressing, I could get more out of my monitor if I wanted to, and more out of the recording if I wanted faster faster frames per second. And so the added flexibility there is great, especially if you want to record something that is more high frame rate and would be better for your viewers to see at 120, since YouTube is capped at 120. Okay, so let's take a look at a game that is actually pretty cool for testing purposes. We can run this game at 4K 120 no problem, but 4K HDR pass-through, the screen is reporting that HDR is in fact passing through, and we should be capturing HDR. It doesn't quite look like it, but that might also be because the monitor that I'm using as the preview monitor isn't HDR. So let's just go ahead. We'll go into the first mission, see how this looks. What you'll see here is this is 4K 60. We're not getting any input lag from the actual capture. And I mean, that looks pretty damn good. Granted, our GPU is not even trying that hard to do this. Either way, the capture looks great, and it's capturing pretty much all aspects of it. This is definitely HDR. It is passing it through just fine. Hey, it looks perfect. Like, if anything, it's a little bit less saturated in the blacks, but I think that's just because it's passing through 8-bit color instead of 12-bit color. I'm still getting, though, an enjoyable enough experience that I wouldn't consider it a downside to be playing through the capture card. Like, it's good enough. Which, when it comes to capture cards and playing through capture cards, there's usually some level of compromise that you have to do. Pretty much all, content creators are taking some level of compromise in visual just to make sure that the recording is perfect and that the gameplay comes through not laggy or jittery. And so for it to be passing through this pretty much flawlessly, like, it's pretty good. Like, comparably to running this just native off of the editing PC, where we're getting the full effect of our monitor. One disappointment that I have is that unfortunately it doesn't seem that the VRR wants to work. Now, I can understand this being a touchy point because yes, it working would affect the overall performance of this capture card in a positive way, because that VRR would make it so that the 4K 60 wouldn't have any tearing. It means that we're going to have to turn on VSync in our settings in order to make it so that tearing doesn't happen, or at least happens minimally. And I understand that this might be just a limitation of the 4K. It's just disappointing that it doesn't quite work properly. And we know from the stuff that's going on with the Switch 2 that sometimes that handshake just doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. So at least the captures are clean even without it. And the gameplay you just saw of Doom Eternal was done without VRR. So I personally consider it good enough, and again, a compromise that I am willing to take in order to actually get a very solid capture.
Do you know what's the best compliment you can give to a capture card? That it is totally unremarkable, in the sense that it works. It just works. I will give AverMedia a little bit of flack because I had to buy a new monitor in order to not have an issue that was very specific to me. So these capture cards can actually record at 21:9. They can, do ultra wide recording. And so I had an ultra wide monitor. Nothing I played ever was at that resolution. And while I could fill up your phone screen, or the few of you who actually have ultra wide monitors screens on YouTube, I typically don't record in that resolution. Except the funny thing is I actually do record in that resolution, but I record my avatar off to the side on that screen. So if I were to use that, I would have to overlay my avatar like most normal people would. I have found that sometimes I'm just in the way. And so being able to move myself left, right, up, center, as big as I want, as small as I want, is something that's best done in post-production. So because I have this unique setup already set up, it was difficult to try to record on top of 21:9 by default. So I switched back to a 16:9 super big monitor, and that fixes the problem right away. It's a niche problem to have, but you know, it is one that I ran into. That was the end of my problems with this thing though. It just works. Every recording I have put out on the Virtual Wolfie Gaming channel for the Switch 2 has been through that capture card. And it is just flawless. You can see it, it just works. It does 60 FPS just fine. It outputs all of the correct colors just fine. It looks great, it sounds great, and it is a huge improvement over the Elgato capture card I was running prior. The features of this thing are great. It's got RGB, which is not necessary, but it does have it. And overall, my experience with it has been solid. So much so that I actually heavily recommend AverMedia capture cards, especially to those who are trying to get into streaming. Between the USB-C version that I am using for my main gaming desktop and this version, which is internalized and I'm using for my Switch 2, I have had almost no problems. And the advanced features of this thing are great. So yeah, this one gets a solid recommendation for me, especially because usually you can get it for less than $300. But that is where I'm going to end today, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, consider giving a like, maybe comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Wolfie, out.